This is a place of many prayers. One day we have to stay silent, but right now there's no one here, so I can talk a little. This is the first image representation that was made of the apparition of Pontmain, getting really close. Here we can see that on the mantle there are the stars that are mentioned by the children. The stars around the mantle become more and more numerous. They keep multiplying. And at that moment, Sister Vitaline, who was witnessing everything, invites everyone to say the Magnificat. It was a very cold night in the European winter in January of 1871 when something extraordinary happened, right here near the place we're heading to now. France was gripped by fear once again after another Napoleonic war. It had been Napoleon III entering yet another war, and the French were once again suffering the consequences of that war. And this would be far from the last war that the people of northern France would face. Because right here in Normandy, some of the worst battles of World War II took place. I want to invite you. I'm going to take you now to a very special place for the Catholic faith in northern France. Everything here is so cute. We pass by these very old little houses. Some of them are still from the Middle Ages and some are from a few centuries ago. These are very small villages, typical of this region of France, which is agricultural, but not like in Brazil with large estates. Here, all the properties are small and family-owned. I don't think I had told you the name of the city yet, but now the sign up ahead is already showing it. It's Pontmain. It's even hard for us to imagine that back then, at the time of the apparition, all of this here was very, very poor. It was a very poor village. It's still small, it only has 816 residents, but it's very cute, very well kept. And of course the basilica that we're going to see in a little while contributes a lot to that, because it brings a lot of visitors here. After many kilometers on the road, we're arriving. Dr. Tua, if it were me, Zanotto, and 6 in the afternoon, in fact, it's already dark here in Northern Europe in the winter, very cold, humid winter. It was a tough night for the people who lived here. As we walk through the village of Pontmain, we see references to the apparition everywhere. This monument here was dedicated to those who died for France in the wars and also to the children of the city. There we see the reference to the visionary children. The population of Pontmain was very Catholic, and at that time this was the only church in the village. Below zero temperature, cold, hunger, uncertainty, and fear also took over the Barbadet family. They raised sheep and chickens. Like many in the war front region nearby, news came that the enemy army was advancing further. 2 sons, Eugène and Joseph Barbadet, had just finished feeding the animals when they were surprised by a sight. It was right here, above them, on this roof. According to the boy's description, it was her, the mother of Jesus, who appeared to them and stood on top of this house, illuminating the city for 3 hours. And she told the children, "Pray, my children, God will soon hear you." 2 more children arrived and saw the same vision. Dozens of neighbors were drawn by the commotion, but Maria could only be seen by the little ones, those with the purest hearts. 11 days after the apparition, what seemed impossible happened. Both sides of the war signed an armistice. That meant that France and Germany would no longer face each other, and of course that immediately brought peace to this region, and Germany would leave. What happened after all? Was it a supernatural event, the mother of Jesus interceding for France or for the village where she appeared? Or was it Jesus who wanted the war to end? On the other hand, could it have just been a coincidence? Don't things sometimes happen at the same time, by chance? The story of the Marian apparition in Pontmain, France in the 19th century is just beginning now. Late 19th century. Europe was very different from the progressive, wealthy, democratic, republican continent we know today. Almost all the territories here were either kingdoms or empires. There was always a lord of those lands, someone usually very egocentric, very self-centered, authoritarian, dictatorial. Each part of Europe had its own strong nationalist ideology. And the Industrial Revolution had already happened in England, in Northern Europe, and in part of Italy. But most of the continent lived very poorly, really lived in misery. In fact, worldwide, there were about 1,150,000,000 people, with 90% living in what we can call today extreme poverty. They depended on everything they produced or raised, right? Crops, animals, and life expectancy was very low, barely over 30 years so, in this Europe of great inequality and short lives. There were, for example, the kingdoms of Portugal and Spain, which we know well. There was also the Kingdom of Italy, the Ottoman Empire, the Austrian Empire, the United Kingdom, which still exists, and the Scandinavian kingdoms. There was also the German Empire, and in the German Empire there was a state called Prussia. I'm not talking about Russia, it's not Russia, it's Prussia. With a P, really, which existed at that time and was ruled by Emperor Wilhelm III. And as Prime Minister there was someone very well known, very charismatic, a certain Otto von Bismarck. He was a brilliant strategist and phrasemaker, one of those politicians who appear from time to time. A rare politician, he was best known for unifying Germany and defending it. I'm talking way back, okay? In those times when differences were almost always settled with knives, with war itself. He stood up for something we still say today, right? That politics is the art of the possible. You see that I have this? What we call salaminho in Brazil, but here it's saucisson, right? For the French, sausage means a cured meat. I have one here on the table. First, because it's delicious in this region, but also because there's another phrase attributed to Bismarck where he says that laws are like sausages. It's better not to see how they're made. Well, but this sausage here is so tasty that I'm going to keep eating it, and to tell you this, that phrase is as good as sausage. We'd better know the true origin. And the war that kept the French in this region up at night was precisely against Bismarck's Prussia. On this side of the trenches, France had already been a republic since the French Revolution, but it was a strange situation. There was an emperor, Napoleon III, who was the grandnephew of the other Napoleon, the more famous Napoleon. The war that began in 1870 was brutal and devastating. And it was already approaching this place where we are, which is between Normandy in the north of France and the Brittany region here in the northwest. Metz, a city in eastern France and initially responsible for the Republic's lines of defense, fell first, and Paris was surrounded afterwards. Napoleon III was now a prisoner, he was deposed, and then another one of those political upheavals happened here in Europe. And the war, which started being called the Franco-Prussian War because it was between France and Prussia, came to be called the Franco-German War, because it was precisely in that year, 1871, that the unification of Germany happened. You need to imagine the horror, which was hunger, cold, fear, and hopelessness. Religion gained a very important strength at that moment. It was a promise of a better life, a promise of salvation. After all, there had to be a life better than this one. This story about the apparitions in Pontmain is surprising, and few people have known about it since we went there. I keep thinking about what those children said, about what they witnessed. And look, let me tell you something. We're preparing to share another apparition story of Maria, this time in Brazil. In Simbres, Pernambuco, in the intense northeast heat, people endure the scorching Brazilian backlands. Now let's do the following. Let's go back to Pontmain. A very simple little house, all made of stone and wood. It's interesting to see here the phases, all the stages of the apparition represented in images. And look back there, the village in 1871. Such old wood. With all these tools here. Heavy metal iron here in the front. I keep wondering if these might be the family's own tools. They're definitely old and replicate what they had at home, right? Here it is. A kind of spinning wheel. It looks like a loom, but I admit I don't know what it is. It's not even written here. It could also be a wheat grinder by the gear mechanism that's here. But we transport ourselves, right? We go back to the time when things happened here. It was in this historical context that a very typical, very simple French family lived in Pontmain, which is 200 kilometers from Paris, the Barbadettes. I mentioned this historical context, but now I'm in their house. They were all simple houses like this one here, made of stone and wood with a very simple roof. Often the barn was attached to the house, the animals lived close to the people, and this was the situation they lived in here. César Barbadette, who was the father living here with the mother and the children. That night he was talking with the kids. One of them was Eugene, who was 12 years old, and the other was Joseph, who was 10 years old. That day, being here in their house, I can even try to put myself in that family's place, seeing how they lived here. Everything very simple, everything very handmade. Such a distressing moment with a war ongoing. The eldest son and 37 others were at war, unsure if they were alive or dead, with no news, just waiting for the war to end. Everyone wanted the war to end. And the family was gathered here with the two little ones. And suddenly, something supernatural happened. It was already nighttime, and everything around here was covered in snow. When the father came to the barn to take care of the animals, the children came along. They were here stacking gorse, which is a yellow plant that grows in this region and is also used to feed the animals. And when Eugene looked out the window here in the barn, he saw something strange outside and decided to go out to see what it was. It was cold. Everything was white, but it wasn't snowing at that moment, and the sky was clear and starry except for one spot where there were no stars. Already outside, accompanied by his younger brother, he started to see in that starless spot above the house in front of the Giddecock family, about 6 meters above the roof, the image of a woman dressed in a blue cloak, a sarrau in French, a kind of typically peasant clothing. The image looked at him and smiled. He looked at her and she looked back. That's what the seer's account says. It's not every day that we're surprised by such beauty, with these stained glass windows, all here illuminated by sunlight. Of course, it's natural to think from the outside that this basilica took more than 30 years to be built. It was only finished in 1914, more than 40 years after the apparition. And inside here, there's something impressive, which are the stained glass windows up on the altar, up there, and the stained glass windows tell each stage of the apparition, which lasted more than 3 hours, stage by stage. In all cathedrals and basilicas, we always see these wonderful sets of stained glass windows that help us understand the story. Here the story being told is the apparition of Pontmain. Remember I said when we were arriving that the city was very poor at that time. It was really a very poor city. The apparition transformed the life of this place. Of course, especially the children, and among them especially the youngest brother, who later ended up being ordained as a priest. And he described everything that happened that day in detail in the text. She was young and tall, dressed in a deep blue mantle from her neck to her feet. The fabric was covered with bright golden stars, and the sleeves were wide and long. She wore sandals of the same blue as her dress, adorned with golden bows. On her head there was a black veil covering half of her forehead, hiding her hair and ears and falling over her shoulders. Above it, a crown similar to a diadem, larger in the front and widening to the sides, had a red line encircling it in the middle. Her hands were small and extended toward us. Her face had the softest delicacy and a smile of ineffable sweetness. Her eyes, full of indescribable tenderness, were fixed on us. Like a true mother, she seemed happier looking at us than we were contemplating her at her feet. Twinkling stars. Here in this little chapel dedicated to St. Anne, the mother of Our Lady, there are many thank yous from people in this region. They left plaques of recognition for the blessings they received. There's even one talking about someone returning from prison, someone who was released from prison. There are people who give thanks for their children. There are many thank yous. And throughout all these years, more than a century here, 2 parishes in this region recognize Our Lady of Pontmain for double protection, both during the Second World War in 1940 and in 1944. After that, Eugenia calls the neighbor and her parents. They come here, but they don't see anything good. They had more important things to do than notice a child at that moment. They went home to eat the soup left on the table. They finished dinner and then went out again, and according to the seers, Our Lady was still on the roof. Now, Sister Vitaline, a nun from Pontmain, arrives, and 2 girls from the neighborhood also arrive. Françoise Richet, who is 11 years old, and Jean-Marie Le Bosset, who is 9 years old. The 2 girls are able to see the apparition, but Sister Vitaline cannot. Now, there are 4 seers. They are so joyful, so exuberant that it draws everyone's attention. The whole village comes over. The sign they put on top of the family's house says there were 60 people right here, exactly where I am now. No adult was able to see what the children were telling them, and many didn't believe what they heard. Joseph and Eugenie's parents said they also didn't see anything at all, no apparition, but they did see 3 stars that formed a triangle. 3 other children arrive who are even younger, and they say they are also witnessing the apparition of the Virgin Mary. Eugenie Frit, 6 years old, Auguste Avis, 4, and Augustine Boutin, the daughter of the local shoemaker, just over 2 years old, who was watching everything from her mother's lap, reaching her little arms into the air as if she wanted to go into Mary's arms. Then, the children call the old abbot Michel Guérin, who was already 70 years old, and they say that when the abbot arrives, the apparition changes. As we can see in this other stained glass window, now they see a circle around the image, a circle that's about 50 centimeters away on each side. And in this circle there are 4 candles, 2 at knee height and 2 above. and a cross appears on the Virgin's chest, and at that moment the abbot asks everyone to pray, and the whole group that was witnessing the apparition starts to pray a rosary. And it's very interesting that they say as they keep praying, the image starts to change, it becomes different. The circle around the Virgin keeps getting bigger, the stars around her mantle become more and more numerous, they keep multiplying. And one of the children says that the Virgin was enveloped by a golden light. And at that moment, Sister Vitaline, who was witnessing everything, invites everyone to say the Magnificat. The prayer, which sounds like a song already written in the Gospel of Luke, goes like this: "My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked upon the humility of his servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed. The Almighty has done great things for me." Holy is his name. When the song is sung, something incredible happens. The children say that a banner unfurls beneath the image, and on it, letter by letter, the following words appear. In French, in golden letters, "Me priez, mes amants." But pray, my children. With each new letter, the seers read aloud in chorus, while the group chants the Magnificat. And here in the main part, in the nave of the church, the words were written in a mosaic: "Me priez, mes enfants," but pray, my children. God will deliver them soon. God will exorcise them soon. Still, according to the account, the faithful sing 2 more hymns, and people start to think that Mary is going to leave. But suddenly an immense light appears, and another phrase is drawn at the feet of that apparition. It's the last phrase, which says, "My son is moved, mon fils céleste, touché," in French. What could that mean? From what the children said, this last phrase appeared marked in a golden color. And it was only at that moment that they began to realize or understand that it was an apparition of Mary, the mother of Jesus. They begin to sing a new song, and then the children report that the Virgin raises her arms to shoulder height, as you can see in this stained glass, and slowly moves her fingers. As if following the rhythm of the song, she smiles at the children with infinite sweetness as they described in ecstasy. The children shout, "She's laughing, she's laughing." And then they spend 10 minutes in communion and begin to sing a song of penance. The Pars Domine, which is usually sung during Lent. Why don't the people listen to this? The children say that the banner disappears, Mary's face becomes serious, and a large red cross appears with Jesus in the same color in front of the mother's chest. Still, according to the account, as we can see in this stained glass window behind me, the words Jesus Christ appeared. On the horizontal bar of the cross, the apparition of Maria then took that cross and fixed her eyes on it. One of the stars that was below starts to move, settles next to the left knee, and lights the candlestick beside it. That's what they say, and successively the star goes on lighting all the candles around the image of Maria. In the detailed account he gave later, already as a priest, Joseph said that during the whole time the Blessed Virgin looked at the crucifix, she did not cry, not a single tear was shed. But the corner of her mouth trembled, and Our Lady showed genuine emotion. The Virgin's lips now seemed to move, repeating the words of the penitential hymn they were singing. Then Sister Vitalini starts another chorus Ave Stella from the Gregorian chant. The children then report that the crucifix disappears. Maria extends her arms toward the faithful again, and white crosses appear around her shoulders. Our Lady smiles again, and the faithful now pray about it. A large white veil slowly begins to cover that apparition. The face is the last part to be covered, then the circle and the candles disappear. It was already past 9 at night when the apparition ended. It had lasted more than 3 hours. Right in front of the family's house. And when they returned, recalling everything they had witnessed, everything they had experienced, they remembered that on the banner, those golden words that appeared beneath the apparition, it was written, "My son was moved by your pleas." The people of Pontmain still didn't know, but exactly at the moment when the apparition began, the Prussian troops, who were at the gates of the city of Laval, right here nearby, decided to stop marching. General Karl von Schmidt, the group's leader, had been ordered not to attack. There are records that the general said the following morning, "We cannot advance any further. In Brittany, there is an invisible lady blocking the way." 10 days later, France and the German Empire signed a treaty. What many came to call the miracle of Pontmain happened. The 38 young men from the city who had enlisted for the war returned alive, including the older brother of the visionary boys, Eugene and Joseph. For the faithful and for the religious people of the city, there was no doubt very soon. Everyone here was saying, commenting that something had really happened here in Pontmain, an apparition of Our Lady. And that because of her, France was finally at peace. The war was over, But reports of visions of Our Lady are frequent and are not always accepted by the Church. An investigation was necessary. The one who got to work was Abbot Guérin, the veteran parish priest of the city, who was present throughout the entire apparition. Although he was not able to see Mary, like all the other adults, he interviewed each of the children who said they had seen Our Lady. That night, January 17, 1871, he spoke with each of them separately to compare their stories. The shoemaker's daughter, just over 2, could hardly speak. But there are reports that, when asked what she had seen, she only answered Jesus, Jesus, with a Z. Even for a baby her age, according to this account, the children's stories were heard more than once. In the end, Abbot Guérin was satisfied, considered the testimonies sincere, and reported everything in writing. To his ecclesiastical superior, the bishop of the Diocese of Laval, that city which narrowly escaped being invaded by the Prussian army. A month later, the diocese sent another clergyman to gather witness testimonies. Once again, just like with the adults who were present, the process was completely redone, checked and rechecked. But the Bishop of Laval, Casimir Vica, still wasn't convinced, so he decided to come to Pontmain himself and listen to all the witnesses. Once again he was convinced by the accounts, but even so he requested hearing and vision medical exams for all the children. Almost a year went by, and only then did the Diocese of Laval publish its conclusion. It was already February 2nd, 1872 when the text was released. We conclude that the Immaculate Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, truly appeared on January 17, 1871. To Eugène and Joseph Barbedet, Françoise Richet, and Jean-Marie Le Bosset in the village of Pontmain. And with that, the worship of Our Lady of Hope was officially authorized forever. January 17th became the day of Notre Dame de Pontmain, Our Lady of Pontmain.